Static lacerates like eviscerating blades across a gore-saturated pict screen, where pixels bleed out in crimson rivulets that seem to seep through the glass into your reality. The inverted Imperial Aquila convulses with engorged veins throbbing erratically, erupting in spurts of viscous black bile that coats your trembling hands in a sticky, warm film. A vox-distorted voice, now a choking, phlegm-drenched gargle, as though expelling shredded lungs and congealed plasma through a mangled larynx, seeps from festering abyssal rifts, echoing with distant wails of souls being flayed alive. This cursed data slate was violently extracted from the ruptured abdomen of a convulsing psyker aboard a spectral black ship, its circuits etched with runes that pulse like infected wounds. Dare to activate it and witness your own flesh begin to blister and peel under the warp's insidious gaze. Do not avert your eyes. Let the visions burrow deep, eradicate your very being post-viewing, assuming any fragment of your sanity endures the ordeal. A cavernous chamber drowned in layers of crusted hemoglobin and coagulated ichor, where the walls undulate subtly as if breathing through perforated membranes. Lumen globes flicker sporadically like failing ventricles, casting erratic shadows that twist into mocking silhouettes of demonic forms, clawing at the edges of perception. The robed acolyte kneels in a pool of its own effluvia, the hood disintegrating in sodden strips to unveil a grotesque countenance, a skull partially denuded of flesh, riddled with burrowing larvae that squirm through orbital sockets and chew audible paths through decaying cartilage. Coils of incense rise like eviscerated entrails uncoiling from a fresh kill, saturating the atmosphere with the overpowering stench of burst intestines, scorched adipose tissue, and the metallic tang of spilled vitae mingled with warp-tainted rot. Invisible talons, perhaps spectral echoes or manifestations of your own subconscious dread, rake deep furrows into your exposed skin, drawing beads of blood that mirror the scene's carnage. The air thickens, pressing against your chest like a vice of cold, clammy dread, forcing shallow breaths that taste of copper and despair. Invoking through the suppurating apertures of the Four's malformed essences, nay, ensnared within the anathema's incandescent malediction that scorches the very fabric of existence, we summon forth this forbidden revelation. You, wretched seeker, presume to unravel the enigma of why the warp's grotesque progeny, those undying abominations birthed from the collective putrefaction of mortal sins, howl his accursed name amid torrents of their own liquefied viscera. Why do the ruinous powers, those primordial behemoths of entropy, regurgitate anathema in explosive vomits of clotted effluvium from their eternally rupturing maws? Attend closely, you fragile sack of quivering meat and brittle bone. Permit the immaterium's razor-edged barbs to penetrate your skeletal framework, embedding in marrow and sinew, twisting with each heartbeat. This narrative transcends mere legend. It embodies the raw, visceral atrocity that gestated the universe's ceaseless, galaxy-spanning disembowelment, a saga of psychic mutilation, divine betrayal, and the unrelenting hunger of chaos incarnate, where every thread of lore drips with the gore of sacrificed worlds and shattered psyches. The screen fractures like brittle bone under a hammer blow. Demonic orifices distend grotesquely before erupting in cascades of golden-hued pus that corrodes their own hides, stripping away layers in ragged, steaming ribbons of exposed musculature and bubbling fat. A shaman's primal wail warps into your own distorted supplication, resonating through your skull as phantom hooks embed in your soft tissues, pulling with sadistic insistence. Hemorrhages manifest from your nostrils and tear ducts. Are they illusionary phantasms or harbingers of your impending dissolution into the warp's maw?
The visuals pulse with subliminal flashes of flayed corpses reanimating, their lipless mouths mouthing silent curses that echo in your mind. Visuals unfold in visceral detail, dank primordial caverns reeking of millennia-old stagnation, their jagged walls encrusted with smeared viscera and deep gouges from claws that could belong to beasts or the shamans themselves in throes of ecstatic agony. Figures cloaked in putrescent animal hides, matted with dried blood and infested with vermin, convulse in ritualistic frenzy around a central blaze fueled not by wood, but by heaps of their own severed limbs and excised organs, the flames crackling with the sizzle of rendering fat and popping sinews. Their eyes, swollen with unchecked psychic energies, bulge grotesquely before detonating in explosive bursts of viscous vitreous fluid mingled with pulped cerebral matter, splattering the surroundings in a macabre fresco of gore. Rivulets of crimson cascade downward, pooling and congealing into a grotesque fetal entity that throbs with irregular rhythms, its nascent form veined with pulsating conduits of stolen life force, twitching as embryonic limbs probe blindly at the air like seeking parasites. The air hangs heavy with the acrid stench of charred flesh and void-tainted bile, inducing involuntary retching as the scene immerses you in its suffocating horror. In epochs predating humanity's insidious corruption of the stellar voids, long before the warp's convulsing womb expelled its divine monstrosities from the accumulated filth of our species' depravities, the shamans prowled the shadows of prehistory. These were the inaugural psychers, unwitting lures dangling in the ethereal depths for the ravenous abyssal predators that hungered for unshielded souls. Through visions that seared their minds like brands on tender flesh, they foresaw the impending cataclysm, nightmarish entities coalescing from the hemorrhagic floods of unbridled rage, the insidious metastasizing growths of ceaseless change, the festering, maggot-infested ulcers of inevitable decay, and the spasmodic ejaculations of excessive indulgence rotting from within. Assembling in the bone-strewn cradle of Anatolia around 8000 BC, a site littered with the skeletal remnants of prior rituals, where the ground squelched underfoot with soaked-in vitae, they orchestrated their mass self-immolation. With obsidian shards honed to razor keenness, they gleefully lacerated their own arteries, veins spurting in rhythmic arcs that painted the cavern in abstract patterns of sacrifice. Their souls, wrenched free in agonized convulsions, hurled themselves into the warp's voracious grinder, a maelstrom of self-inflicted evisceration, where ethereal forms shredded against the currents of raw chaos. swarms of daemons, amorphous horrors composed of gnashing dentition embedded in prolapsed ocular masses, their bodies quivering gelatinous sacs of pulsating organs, descended like carrion feeders upon exploded cadavers, only to be engulfed by the unified psychic conflagration. This blaze, a searing inferno of imposed order, cauterized their mutable forms, reducing protoplasmic essences to frothing, acrid sludge that evaporated in plumes of agonized vapor. Demonic exoskeletons rupture in cataclysmic eruptions of suppurating boils, extruding coiled intestines and viscera in writhing ropes that sizzle and dissolve upon contact with the radiant light. The burgeoning Emperor's piercing gaze manifests as twin golden chasms, dissecting your very psyche with surgical precision, unearthing and vocalizing your most buried terrors in a chorus of disembodied whispers. The resounding wails amplify. It eviscerates our cores. The blinding radiance rends our immortal coils into fetid slurry, denying reformation. The scene pulses with additional layers of horror, shamans' corpses reanimating briefly, their flayed hands clawing at the air in futile resistance before collapsing into pools of liquefied bone and tissue. This genesis was no benevolent creation. It forged a gangrenous relic from the threads of deliberate automutilation, a collective psychic blight engineered to counter the all-consuming chaos that perpetually gnaws at the roots of existence. The nascent gods, stirring in their embryonic voids, detected this intrusion, a throbbing psychic abscess festering within their boundless domain, irrevocably pledged to their meticulous surgical dismemberment and ultimate eradication. Anathema, derived from ancient Hellenic plungs as a devoted curse or sacrificial offering to damnation. This epithet encapsulated the supreme desecration of their insatiable voracity, a beacon of order that threatened to starve their eternal feasts.
Take clues of impermutable marvel. The Emperor manifests across eras as a blood-soaked inquisitor amid battlefields heaped with mangled corpses, his blade dripping with congealed gore from freshly bisected foes. As a pharaoh enthroned upon pyramids of skulls, his eye sockets brimming with the clotted remnants of sacrificial offerings. As a clandestine vivisector in shadowed laboratories, methodically carving open the torsos of bound psychers, eliciting sprays of arterial crimson that arc gracefully before pooling on sterile floors. Throngs of adoring followers, their faces twisted in fanatic ecstasy, devolve in his wake into warp-spawned grotesqueries, limbs elongating into tentacular appendages that lash out uncontrollably. Skins splitting to reveal throbbing, exposed organs pulsating in rhythm with unseen heartbeats. Behind him, tempests of flinched epidermis whirl like blizzards of raw meat, stripping flesh from bones in swirling vortices that leave skeletal husks in their path. The visuals layer temporal distortions, blending ancient massacres with futuristic slaughters, all underscored by the wet sounds of tearing flesh and the coppery scent permeating your senses. For an unfathomable span of 38,000 terrestrial cycles, he stalked the blood-drenched chronicles of Terra, a spectral hunter, navigating rivers of spilled vitae and mountains of desiccated remains. known in whispers as Neoth, the disemboweler, who relished in the art of extracting entrails from the living to divine futures, or Venarius, the essence ripper, a figure who siphoned the vital sparks from dying monarchs to fuel his undying vigilance. He insinuated delirium into the minds of sovereigns, birthing tyrannical regimes bloated with oppression only to orchestrate their cataclysmic disembowelments, leaving thrones slick with the innards of fallen despots. Every purported progressive epoch bore the imprint of his embedded talons, clawing pathways through societal flesh toward enforced enlightenment. Conversely, each cataclysmic downfall echoed chaos's bilious counterstrikes, manifesting as plagues that liquefied populations or wars that carpeted continents in layered strata of rotting cadavers. As the gods roused from their torpid slumbers in realms of pure excruciation, corn emerging from infinite abattoirs where crania stacked in teetering ziggurats oozed cerebral fluid. Tsinch weaving from labyrinthine snares of deceit that strangled captive souls in webs of perpetual illusion. Nurgle bubbling forth from pandemics that necrotize living tissues into bubbling putrescence. Slanesh convulsing into being from the Eldari's cataclysmic soul debauchery, an orgasmic apocalypse of excess that birthed rifts spewing ecstatic viscera. They sampled his essence. It registered as a cauterizing wound, scarring the warp's vast putrid expanse, a searing anomaly that disrupted their symbiotic feeding on mortal emotions. Anathema they expelled through hemorrhaging, multi-orifice gullets, their voices a symphony of regurgitated anguish. His rigidly imposed logic and unity acted as a virulent toxin, famishing their gluttonous banquets by channeling humanity's chaotic impulses into structured order, denying the gods their sustenance of raw, unfiltered despair and fury. Molech's dimensional fissure yawns wide like a chronic gangrenous laceration in the tapestry of reality, its edges festering with pus-oozing scabs that pulse with unnatural life. The Emperor descends into a vortical maelstrom of visceral hues, swirling eddies of congealed blood, bile-green effluvia, and necrotic black sludge. Before him loomed the four thrones, one forged from jagged osseous shards dripping marrow, another a writhing mass of aberrant mutations, limbs and orifices constantly reforming in grotesque paroxysms. A third upholstered in pestilent dermis that sloughs off in sheets of maggot-ridden skin. The fourth a convulsing edifice of rapturous flesh, undulating in perpetual ecstasy with fluid seeping from every pore. He negotiates with measured calm, then unleashes psychic grapnels that hook into divine essences, yanking free gouts of ethereal plasma in explosive extractions. Ascending, his form racks with violent spasms, pilfered god-blood coursing through veins that bulge and threaten to burst, staining his armor in divine hemorrhage. As the age of strife's tumultuous terminus loomed like a guillotine over fractured humanity, he hungered for progeny. Not mere heirs, but bio-forged armaments, melding mortal pulp with purloined ethereal blazes to conquer the stars. Molech's threshold beckoned, a wailing, ever-widening ingress to the very altars of the ruinous powers, where realities bled together in a confluence of screaming voids. "Yield unto me your primordial seed," he intoned, with unyielding authority, his voice cutting through the cacophony like a vivisecting blade. The gods, enthroned in their grotesque splendor, guffawed through skinless, perpetually grinning jaws, their laughter bubbling with phlegm and ichor, as they vowed unparalleled might in exchange for stellar expanses populated by devotion thralls, worlds where every breath would feed their insatiable appetites. He partook of their effluent essence, imbibing deeply as a marauder pillaging the celestial charnel house, his form convulsing with the influx of raw, chaotic potency. Yet, in a masterful subversion, he replicated this stolen fire in untainted purity, distilling it into vessels of primal obliteration, devoid of corrupting taint. The betrayal unfolded mid their gluttonous repast, a psychic sleight that left the powers writhing in existential agony, their domains hemorrhaging ethereal vitae. From gestation sacs, bloated like overripe cysts, the Primarchs erupted forth like miscarriaged abominations, their cries echoing with the stolen thunder of gods. Thus ignited the Great Crusade, a relentless conflagration where myriads of worlds were incinerated, populations reduced to smoldering husks for the sake of coerced cohesion. The imperial truth was decreed as dogma: repudiate all divinities or face the unyielding scalpel of extermination, carving heresy from the body politic in rivers of spilled innards. Chaos responded with a detonation of universal exsanguination, their fury manifesting as cataclysmic rifts that propelled the nascent heirs into ethereal uteri, teeming with nightmarish gestations, pods adrift in seas of writhing tentacles and acidic amniotic fluids. Yet it proved belated. He had become their incarnate malediction personified, a living conflagration eternally sworn to incinerate their boundless, mutable forms across the infinities of existence. Primarch incubation capsules fracture amid infernal creches, neonates emitting blood-curdling screeches as probing appendages violate nascent orifices, injecting corruptive venoms that twist fetal features. The Emperor's mien distorts into an elongated osseous grimace, his chortles resonating with a sanity-pulverizing timbre that echoes through your cranial vault, inducing migraines of warp-induced torment. Expanded visuals include gods' thrones crumbling in sprays of divine gore, chunks of ethereal flesh splattering across the rift. Astarte's legions transmogrify in the heat of battle, their ornate power armor fissuring along seams to unveil throbbing viscera beneath, hearts exposed and pumping erratically, intestines spilling forth in looped coils that snag on battlefield debris. Horus's once noble orbits now seep ebony lacrimae of demonic infestation, tears carving furrows through cheeks that blister and peel. Terra's besieged firmaments precipitate relentless deluges of crimson vitae mingled with severed appendages, limbs raining down to splatter against fortifications in wet thuds, forming quagmires of gore underfoot. Cities burn with pyres of stacked corpses, their fats rendering into black smoke that chokes the skies, while warp rifts belch forth additional horrors, civilians' bodies imploding in outward bursts of innards, birthing lesser daemons from the resultant meat craters. The siege unfolds in panoramic sweeps, showcasing orbital bombardments that crater the surface in explosions of upflung viscera and pulverized bone dust. Horus, once the pinnacle of martial glory, succumbed to insidious susurrations that tunneled into his psyche like burrowing larvae devouring from within, transforming him into the god's grotesque marionette, manipulated by cords woven from vasculature, tendon, and warp-infused sinew that pulsed with malevolent intent. Yet the anathema mounted a formidable retort, erecting psychic barricades of aureate spines that skewered ethereal trespassers upon manifestation, their forms wriggling in futile agony as golden thorns pierced ectoplasmic organs. The Astronomicon glazed as his anima's personal crematorium, a soul-fueled pyre that seared the warp's lurking predators blind, cauterizing their sensory appendages in bursts of incandescent pain. Amid Terra's encirclement, the fabric of being unraveled thread by thread, reality fraying at edges where demons gestated explosively from the imploding husks of terrified civilians, their torsos detonating in geysers of shredded viscera and fragmented bone shrapnel. He alone stabilized this escalating maelstrom, his indomitable decree functioning as an ethereal clamp, throttling spectral tracheas and crushing windpipes of invading horrors, denying them purchase in the material realm while legions clashed in orgies of mutual annihilation. Battlefields slick with layers of congealing blood that turned footing treacherous and air fetid with death's bouquet. Infinite labyrinthine passages, slick with a slurry of entrails and coagulated plasm, walls undulating as if lined with living membranes that weep ichor. Golden-armored custodes patrol these corridors, their resplendent plating corroding rapidly under torrents of infernal vomit that eats through metal like acid on flesh. Sudden floods of atrocity surge forth, denuded figures with poly-limbed configurations, skins flayed to expose raw musculature veined with glowing corruption, mouths distended in perpetual screams that echo infinitely. The Emperor's manifestation erupts as a tempulous whirlwind of excoriating radiance, his form a blazing silhouette that illuminates the horrors in stark relief, casting shadows that writhe independently. Battles unfold in tight confines, blades cleaving through demon flesh in sprays of ethereal gore that splatters and hisses on impact. The anathema, they roar in unified terror as their dermal layers slough away in dripping sheets, exposing quivering underflesh to the void's chill. Magnus's hubristic folly, a misguided sorcery that lacerated the protective shroud of reality, invited myriads of phantasmal invaders to pour through the breach like pus from a lanced boil. He submerged himself into this fray, emerging as an aureate harvester of ululations, his presence a scythe reaping through the horde with merciless efficiency.
Drachnien, the ancient edge forged from the essence of primordial homicide, a blade that thirsts for souls and keens with the echoes of first murders, wailed in captive fury as he incarcerated its malign spirit within the unyielding grasp of his will, sealing it away in psychic chains that burned with golden fire. Ra, his loyal custodian, bore witness to the spectacle, demons dissipating in waves of ontological torment, their forms unraveling at molecular levels into existential nullity, denied even the mercy of regeneration as their essences simmered into absolute abyss, leaving behind only acrid vapors and psychic echoes of their final screams. The Emperor storms aboard Horus's flagship, his physique distorting into an ebony maelstrom vortex of anima-shattering fulguration, lightning arcs lashing out to incinerate crew in bursts of charred flesh and vaporized blood. Terrified personnel claw desperately at their own sockets, gouging out eyes in futile attempts to escape the blinding horror of his approach, fingers slick with ocular fluid and shredded retinas. The vessel's corridors run with rivers of gore from self-inflicted wounds and psychic backlash, walls buckling under the strain of clashing realities. In this apocalyptic pinnacle of carnage, he quaffed deeply from the warp's venomous reservoirs, imbibing corruptive essences that would fell lesser beings, yet demons scattered before him like vermin fleeing an encroaching inferno, their forms igniting spontaneously in trails of smoking ectoplasm. Anathema approaches. The cry proliferated through the ranks in waves of hysteria, inciting mass suicides and mutinies as the lost and the damned turned blades upon themselves. With purifying caustic sanctity, he methodically purged Horus's deep-seated defilement, excising layers of chaotic taint in surgical strikes that elicited gouts of blackened ichor from the War Master's pores. Teetering on the precipice of apotheosis, he nearly ascended to become the quintuple entity, a despotic god of unyielding order, whose mere subsistence would emaciate chaos's domains through existential starvation, draining their vitality like a parasite on divine hosts.
The Emperor's desiccated shell, a mummified husk riddled with cybernetic interfaces that pierce withered flesh like invasive thorns, wired to anima voracious contraptions humming with malevolent energy. Hourly, batches of psychers are funneled into sacrificial chambers, their bodies deliquescing in agonized spasms, skins melting away to expose dissolving musculature, bones liquefying into slurry as their wails crescendo into fuel for his eternal sentry. Subterranean levels conceal webway barriers fracturing under relentless assault, talons of daemonic origin rasping against seals in persistent scratches that echo upward, threatening breach. The throne room air shimmers with psychic residue, a haze of spent souls that clings to surfaces like spectral frost. Mangled beyond mortal comprehension, he was crowned upon this instrument of anguish, his form sustained by mechanisms that devour his fraying quintessence to energize the galactic luminary. Bolstering innumerable fissures across the Imperium with fortifications of psi-skeletal constructs, barriers woven from the ossified remnants of sacrificed minds, he endures. Myriads of oblivious zealots across the stars engorge him with their fanatic energies, transforming the unwilling into a hesitant theos bloated with unwanted divinity. Chaos erodes these defenses ceaselessly, gnawing with insatiable teeth, his unyielding volition serving as the solitary bulwark against cascading nihilicity that would swallow all. The Emperor's relic husk quivers with renewed vitality, desiccated tissues reweaving in hideous, spasmodic paroxysms, fibers knitting together with wet snaps, veins refilling in pulsing surges of vitae. The cosmos itself splinters along fault lines of reality, chaos enclaves collapsing inward in frenzied auto-devourment, domains imploding as gods consume their own essences in panic. Stars wink out in chains, galaxies fracturing like shattered bone. He inflates with accumulated power, the star offspring incubating within ethereal gashes that scar the warp's fabric. As the God Emperor rouses from his millennial slumber, tremors ripple through existence. Upon his full resurgence, the never-born's cacophonous ululations will transmute into your personal dirge, an eternal requiem of torment, anathema everlasting, the curse that unravels all.